Before anything starts, a strong word of caution. Viewer discretion is advised. What you're about to hear isn't fiction, but it might feel like it. This story is meant for educational and entertainment purposes only. What follows is not just rumor or speculation. It's the verbatim federal courtroom testimony from the high-profile trial of Sean Diddy Combs. These words weren't whispered in backrooms or spread on tabloids. They were spoken in a courtroom under oath, documented and reported live by inner-city press. And when Chewy Thompson, who claimed to be the grandson of none other than Elvis Presley, took the witness stand, no one could have guessed the storm he was about to unleash. As Chewy walked into the courtroom that day, the press barely noticed him. He wasn't a household name, didn't look like a celebrity. But within minutes, everyone, judges, lawyers, and even the most battle-worn journalists, were leaning forward in disbelief. His voice didn't tremble, and he wasn't there for drama. What he carried wasn't just a testimony, it was a truth wrapped in decades of silence. And what he revealed wasn't just disturbing. It was the kind of thing that pulls the rug out from under your understanding of reality. Under oath, Chewy claimed that his grandfather, Elvis Aaron Presley, hadn't just been a music icon. He had once found himself trapped in a terrifying, underground world. Not metaphorically. Literally. This world, Chewy said, was orchestrated and controlled by a name no one expected to hear. Melvin Combs, the father of Sean Diddy Combs. According to Chewy, Elvis knew Melvin personally. And what he witnessed in that hidden world left him broken, afraid, and isolated. These weren't normal parties or industry gatherings. These were places where nothing was sacred, where human dignity was stripped away for the entertainment of the powerful. Chewy said his grandfather had been invited to these events, not as a guest but as a symbol, a trophy. And what he saw there, it haunted him for the rest of his life. Chewy brought more than just words. He carried physical evidence. A video never seen by the public, one that showed Elvis at one of these so-called gatherings. In the footage, Elvis looked pale, frightened, and completely out of place, sitting stiffly beside Melvin Combs. His eyes were wide, not with wonder, but with terror. Then Chewy dropped another bombshell. He said he himself had once been invited to one of these modern-day versions of the same twisted parties, now hosted by Diddy himself. What he saw there, he claimed, shocked him so deeply that he confronted Diddy right then and there, and knocked him unconscious. All the while, as Chewy relayed these events, Diddy sat frozen at the defense table. He didn't speak. He didn't interrupt. But the expression on his face told the world everything it needed to know. He wasn't confused. He wasn't surprised. He was exposed. His silence was deafening. And for the first time, the empire he had built began to shake. The courtroom went completely quiet as Chewy adjusted the microphone in front of him. He didn't speak like a rehearsed witness. He wasn't reading from notes. He wasn't a polished media figure. He was a grandson carrying the unbearable weight of legacy, pain, and a buried truth. "My name is Chewy Thompson," he said clearly, his voice steady but full of emotion, "and I'm the grandson of Elvis Aaron Presley. I'm here today because my grandfather didn't die from addiction. He died from exposure. Exposure to something he was never meant to see, something no human should ever witness." The courtroom sat still. Chewy didn't need to convince the jury. He didn't need dramatic pauses or courtroom tricks. The heaviness in his voice did all the work. Everyone listening could tell, he wasn't lying. He wasn't even exaggerating. He was unburdening a truth that had been locked in silence for decades. Chewy started to explain what very few people knew. That sometime in the early 1970s, Elvis met a man named Melvin Combs. Not many people in the public had heard of Melvin, but behind the scenes he was a powerful force. According to Chewy, Melvin wasn't just some music manager or executive. He was something else. He moved between industries like a shadow, music, politics, even organized crime. He wasn't the man in front of the camera. He was the one behind it. Chewy said that Melvin and Elvis's manager, Colonel Tom Parker, had a much deeper connection than people suspected. They shared favors, secrets, possibly blackmail. Melvin was a broker of shadows, Chewy testified. He made things disappear, people, scandals, entire events. He knew how to erase a night like it never happened. And somehow Elvis got caught up in it. Chewy described how Elvis had once opened up to Priscilla Presley, his grandmother, about being forced to attend strange, exclusive parties. These weren't industry mixers or casual gatherings. These were rituals hidden behind glitz and luxury designed to control. Elvis described them as cold, dark, and spiritually draining. He wasn't just uncomfortable. He was frightened. But by then he was too deep to escape. At that time, Elvis was experiencing what Chewy called a spiritual breakdown. He had started to feel trapped. Not by fame but by forces that operated outside of law and morality. He told our family, Chewy said, that he felt like he was being used. Like he had entered a world where silence was currency, and flesh was the price of power. Elvis had met Melvin through music but stayed in his world out of fear. The deeper Elvis went, the less control he had. And as Chewy testified, you could feel the tension in the room grow with each word. Diddy, sitting stiffly at the defense table, began to tense up. This wasn't just about him. This was about what he had inherited. And it wasn't wealth, it was something darker. Chewy began to describe Melvin Combs not as a respected man, but as a manipulator. Someone who knew exactly how to play both sides. He claimed Melvin had worked as a liaison between intelligence agencies like the CIA and underworld networks embedded within the music industry. He didn't want stardom. He wanted control. And he got it, through manipulation, fear, and surveillance. According to Chewy, Melvin had his hooks in some of the biggest names in history. Using documents dug up by a private investigator, along with old family archives that had been kept locked away for decades, Chewy revealed a chilling timeline. Melvin had ownership in a series of properties in California and Florida, all of which were fronts for gatherings they called Red Doors. These Red Door events were the early prototypes of what would later be known in the industry as freak-offs. Exclusive, elite, invitation-only parties where rules didn't exist. And at one of these parties, Chewy claimed, a reluctant and frightened Elvis Presley had been present. He wasn't attending. He was being displayed. Elvis wasn't there to enjoy himself. He was there because his presence made other stars feel safe enough to attend. But deep down he hated it. Chewy said that Elvis had written desperate letters to his manager, begging to be removed from the scene. He called those places hell with chandeliers. He described Melvin as a man with a smile that never touched his eyes. In one of Elvis's recovered journals, Chewy read a chilling entry aloud. I saw a child walk into the room. A man closed the door. I couldn't move. I wanted to scream. Melvin just watched, and grinned. The room froze. People stared ahead, unblinking. Even the judge shifted in his seat. Chewy's voice didn't waver. He simply said, Melvin created this world. Diddy just inherited it. And he made it louder, more visible, and more dangerous. Then Chewy pulled out a journal, old, worn leather binding, faded ink. It was one of Elvis's final personal diaries. He flipped through the pages carefully, reading excerpts out loud. The courtroom could barely believe what they were hearing. If I leave, they ruin me. If I stay, they own me. Melvin said, the camera is always on even when you can't see it. I saw things I can't sing about. And I don't think God will forgive me for staying silent. These weren't lyrics. They weren't metaphors. They were cries for help. Chewy explained that his grandfather had become a pawn in a carefully crafted game of power and blackmail. He was manipulated into attending one nightmare after another. Each one more twisted. Each one more damaging. And each time Elvis was drugged, filmed, and monitored. Chewy testified that in a hidden vault inside Graceland, he found old letters, torn film reels, and personal recordings. Some of those reels had names scribbled across them, some belonging to major celebrities still alive today. Others? They had vanished without a trace. And then came the video. It was marked 1974, and in the faded ink at the bottom corner of the reel, the words were barely legible. Asterisk the White House, Bel Air, California star. But make no mistake, this wasn't political. The footage opened with the flickering glow of candlelight. It wasn't romantic, it felt ritualistic. Figures moved through a grand marble hallway, their faces hidden behind masquerade masks. In the background, a strange kind of music played, not Elvis, not rock, nothing familiar. It was dark, ambient, unsettling. The camera slowly panned into a ballroom, and that's when the atmosphere turned deeply disturbing. Dozens of men and women stood around, some seated, some standing, others guiding barely dressed young individuals through side doors concealed by heavy curtains. Then the camera locked in on a man sitting in the far corner. And there was no mistaking him, it was Elvis Presley. The king of rock and roll. But this wasn't the confident, magnetic Elvis fans knew. He was slouched in a gold-framed chair, sweating visibly, wearing a suit that looked too tight, like it was choking him. His eyes darted nervously across the room like he was trapped, like a caged animal. Sitting beside him was Melvin Combs, laughing with a fat cigar in his hand. At one moment, Melvin leaned in close and whispered something into Elvis's ear. Elvis visibly flinched, recoiled. His discomfort was undeniable. Chewy paused the footage and spoke, his voice calm but heavy. I want everyone to understand, he said as the screen froze on his grandfather's face. "That man sitting there is broken. You're not looking at the king of rock. You're looking at a prisoner." The room fell into silence. Chewie explained that this footage had been sealed away in a locked Graceland storage room for decades. It had been misfiled with old reels from fan events, harmless looking on the outside. He never showed it to anyone before today. He never even told anyone he had it. But even then he couldn't bring himself to destroy it. Because deep down he knew the world needed to see it. To know the truth. Suddenly the video cut mid-movement. The next scene was dark, a hallway dimly lit. A young girl no older than 15 walked past the camera, her head lowered. Then a voice came from off-screen. It was unmistakably Melvin's calling her name. Then, nothing. Silence. Gasping erupted in the courtroom. One juror covered her mouth. Another turned their face away, visibly shaken. Even Diddy, sitting at the defense table, looked shaken for the first time. The smug expression vanished. He leaned into his lawyer, whispering furiously, his fingers trembling ever so slightly. Chewie turned his gaze directly at Diddy, then leaned into the mic and said with chilling calm, "You recognize the furniture, don't you?" The room froze again. "That's because you still host parties in that same house." The shock rippled through the gallery. Chewie then turned the narrative from the footage itself to what happened afterward. What Elvis experienced after that 1974 gathering, and the others that followed, wasn't just a physical ordeal. It broke him spiritually. The man who once sang about love, heartbreak, rebellion, had become silent on the inside. His soul was hollowed out. Chewie claimed that Elvis tried to pull away from that sinister inner circle after a particularly disturbing event in 1976. A party held in Palm Springs involving multiple underage individuals and an array of powerful high-profile guests. When he returned home that night he looked shaken to his core. He told Priscilla, "I've seen the devil in silk sheets, and he knows my name." From that point on, Elvis began to distance himself from everyone. He started keeping a journal, entries never before seen by the public. Chewie revealed one dated just 3 weeks before Elvis's death. It read, "They offered me silence in exchange for peace. But peace isn't peace when you've seen what I've seen. They have footage. They have files. They own the people who write the news. I can't fight them. But maybe one day, my blood will." According to Chewie, Elvis's decline wasn't about addiction, it was about desperation. The drugs dulled the memories. They were a form of escape, not indulgence. He wasn't partying. He was trying to forget. And the people who once promised him safety, the executives, the so-called friends in government, the entertainment moguls, they became his prison guards. They surrounded him, watched him, controlled the narrative. If he spoke, they'd discredit him. They owned the media. Every major tabloid back then had ties to the very machine that controlled him. He couldn't speak out. If he did, they would bury him or worse. Then Chewie dropped a final, chilling detail. Just a week before Elvis's death, he had a heart-to-heart with a trusted family member. He said, "If anything happens to me, don't believe the headlines. And don't trust anyone in a tailored suit." On August 16, 1977, Elvis Presley was found dead in his Graceland bathroom. The official report said it was a heart attack brought on by drugs. But Chewie suggested that the real cause was far more sinister. Elvis wasn't killed with a weapon. He was killed with silence. With fear. With secrets too heavy to carry. Chewie paused. Then said, "They didn't just kill a man. They killed a witness." Years passed and Chewie thought the nightmare had died with Elvis. Until 2022. That's when it all came rushing back. He received a direct message from a well-known music producer inviting him to a private event in Los Angeles. At first it felt routine. But when he arrived he realized he was back in that house. The same property from the old footage. The White House in Bel Air. The rituals had changed in appearance but not in essence. He was handed a drink he hadn't requested. Escorts whispered to him about the gold room upstairs. The entire place dripped with sinister undertones. Then he saw him, Diddy, standing in the middle of it all like a king at court. Holding court really. Laughing, sipping, commanding attention. His eyes scanned the room like he owned it. But then something happened that no one expected. Chewie testified that he saw Diddy suddenly grab a young man, someone who looked barely legal, by the arm and pull him aggressively toward a hallway. The boy looked terrified. It wasn't a friendly gesture. It wasn't mentorship. It was control. It was domination. Chewie said something inside him snapped. He stepped in, physically blocking Diddy's path. He told Diddy to back off. Diddy, allegedly, turned with cold eyes and whispered, "You don't know what you're stepping into." But Chewie stared him down and replied, "You're stepping into the same hell my grandfather did, and I'm not going to let you do it again." The room around them went quiet. People stopped dancing. The vibe shattered. Then Chewie said Diddy got right up in his face, and so Chewie hit him. One punch. Clang. Diddy dropped. People screamed. But the strangest part? His security didn't even react. They didn't rush in. They just looked at Chewie like they knew. Scared, Chewie stepped out of the mansion. No charges were filed. No one called the cops. But that wasn't the point. The message had been sent. Loud and crystal clear. In front of the courtroom, Chewie didn't hold back. He turned his head slowly and looked Diddy in the eye, who now appeared visibly shaken. "I wasn't Elvis," Chewie said. "And I wasn't going to die with the secret." The room went silent as Chewie took a deep breath. Then he added, "You should have known that blood remembers, and mine never forgot." After that intense confrontation at Diddy's mansion, Chewie believed it was over. He thought walking away from that twisted night meant he could finally sleep again. But he was wrong. Because the same machine that had once destroyed his grandfather, one built to protect the powerful and silence the brave, was still alive. It was still hungry. And now it had its eyes set on him. The very next day things started to unravel quickly. "I woke up to 5 missed calls," Chewie testified. "All from unknown numbers I didn't recognize. Then came the DMs, anonymous messages that just said things like, 'You messed up,' or 'You should have kept your mouth shut.' At first, Chewie didn't think much of it. He even laughed, telling himself they were just trolls. But within 72 hours, it got much darker. His car was keyed from bumper to bumper. A family member received a disturbing phone call from someone pretending to be a doctor, claiming Chewie had been in a fatal accident. It wasn't violence. It was psychological warfare, cold, calculated, and personal. "They weren't trying to kill me," Chewie said. "They were trying to make me kill myself, just like they did to my grandfather." For Chewie, everything began to connect. The mansion he had been invited to, he discovered it wasn't just some random rented estate. It was owned by a holding company, still under Diddy's trust. The woman who took his phone at the entrance? She wasn't just staff. She was part of Diddy's personal event production team. That party wasn't a coincidence. It was something worse, something planned. Something ritualistic. It wasn't spontaneous, Chewie told the court. It was a continuation of something older. Something sicker. But what broke him completely wasn't the threats, the damage, or the fake calls. It was a discovery he made one late night, deep in the Graceland archives. While digging through dusty storage boxes, Chewie found a small, unlabeled cassette tape. He didn't expect much. But when he played it, everything stopped. It was Elvis's voice, raw, low, and full of pain. The words shook him. "If something happens to me," the tape began, "don't let them rewrite it. Don't let them say it was pills or weakness. They wore me down, they cornered me with cameras, with secrets. And Melvin, he said one day his boy would take the throne, and I'd be a footnote." That single voicemail shattered Chewie's heart. He realized his grandfather hadn't just been a legend lost to time. He had been a man trapped by a machine. But that pain also gave Chewie something else, purpose. And that purpose pushed him to act. So he made the call. He told his lawyers. He reached out to the prosecutors. And when they offered him the chance to testify, he didn't hesitate. He said yes. Not as a celebrity. Not as a victim. But as a witness. A witness to a dark system that had operated without accountability for decades. As Chewie concluded the timeline of horrors, the judge paused and gave him permission to make one final statement. What Chewie did next didn't just make headlines, it made history. He reached into his bag and pulled out a sealed envelope. Inside was a typed transcript. Not just any transcript. This one was from a private investigator. The contents? Shocking. It detailed witness accounts, unseen video footage, log sheets, and internal text messages between members of Diddy's team. The focus of these texts? How to contain the Chewie situation. Then Chewie read a single line out loud. "If this kid connects Elvis to the original freak-off blueprint, we're all FD. He needs to be silenced. Discredited. Ruined." The courtroom erupted. One juror even gasped audibly, saying, "Oh my God." All eyes turned to Diddy. But Chewie wasn't done yet. He turned directly to the mogul and said, "You didn't just inherit your father's fortune. You inherited his evil." Then he dropped the final bombshell. "In the Graceland archives," Chewie continued, "we found a sealed envelope from 1975. It was addressed to the FBI but never mailed. Inside that envelope was a list of names. People Elvis claimed had attended Melvin Combs' freak-off parties. The names? Each one shook the courtroom to its core. Clive Davis, Quincy Jones, Russell Simmons. And at the very bottom of the list, in handwritten ink, a chilling note. Melvin said one day his son would run the entire empire. Chewy handed the envelope to the court. Handwriting verified. Postmark confirmed. Then, without missing a beat, he told the judge he had one final piece of evidence left to present. A photograph. The screen behind him lit up. The image was grainy. Black and white. But unmistakable. A young Diddy, around 9 years old, standing in the exact same hallway of the bare mansion that appeared in the 1974 video. That image broke whatever illusion was left. Diddy wasn't just continuing a dark legacy. He had been raised in it. Reporters scrambled from the gallery. Lawyers protested, shouting for the judge to strike the image from the record. But it was too late. The public had seen it. The jury had seen it. And nothing could unsee it. Diddy, once an untouchable icon of the music world, was now the face of something far darker. A dynasty soaked in generational exploitation. As Chewy stepped down from the witness stand, the courtroom remained frozen. Diddy sat motionless. His jaw clenched. Hands trembling. Eyes glued to the floor. For the first time in his life, the mask cracked. And what came through wasn't rage. It wasn't arrogance. It was something deeper, a quiet, soul-level knowing. This was the end. Chewy paused just a few feet away, and in front of the jury, the press, and a worldwide livestream audience, he turned back toward Diddy. His voice steady. His eyes clear. You once said, "No party is like a Diddy party." He let the silence sit before continuing, "Well, I've seen your parties. I've seen what happens when the music stops and the doors close. My grandfather saw it too, and it killed him." He exhaled. Then one last time he spoke his truth. "You made the industry your playground. But every playground has a reckoning. Every king has a fall. And every secret, eventually screams for light." The courtroom held its breath. The silence was so heavy, it felt like gravity itself. And then Chewy delivered his final line. "You didn't just lose your empire today. You lost your silence. Forever." The judge nodded solemnly. "This testimony," he said, "will remain part of the public record." As Chewy turned to leave, Diddy finally looked up. Their eyes met. No words were exchanged. But everything was understood. Chewy didn't look angry. He didn't look proud. He simply looked like a man who had carried generations of pain, and finally let it roar. Outside the courtroom, chaos erupted. Reporters, cameras, flashes everywhere. Microphones thrust toward him. Protesters holding signs that read, "Protect the truth," and "Justice for Elvis." But Chewy didn't stop. He didn't speak. He just kept walking, steady and straight, like a man with nothing left to prove. Behind him, inside that courthouse, Diddy sat still, surrounded by lawyers. But utterly alone. Because no legal strategy could erase what had just been burned into the public's memory. The image of Elvis Presley's grandson accusing one of hip-hop's most powerful men of continuing a legacy of evil. Back at Graceland, Chewy's family waited. They had already seen the evidence, the tapes, the letters, the voicemails. But when he walked through that front door, something shifted. It wasn't just a homecoming. It was the moment they realized what Chewy had truly done. He didn't just protect Elvis's name. He freed it, from gossip, from documentaries, from the watered-down stories that never told the whole truth. That night, Chewy stood alone in Elvis's old music room. He placed his hand on the baby grand, the same piano his grandfather played during restless nights. Then he lit a single candle. One flame. One word. Closure. He whispered, "They didn't erase you, Granddad. They just hit pause." He glanced at a photo of Elvis on the wall. "And today," Chewy said, "I pressed play." Behind him, the photo of Elvis didn't look like a ghost anymore. It looked like a legend, finally heard.